Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Coffee with Captain. Captain Miles, you want to take us away?
Sure. So we're three today. Again, we have an honored guest to join us, Captain Kateliin Shaw of the Schooner Adventurous and the Sound Waters program. Did I say that right?
No.
No.
Sound Experience.
Sound Experience.
We're on the West Coast.
Yeah, sorry. Sound Experience. I was on the web just this morning too. I don't know how I slipped that one. Must be old age. But anyway, thank you for joining us, Kateliin. It's early out there, 3 hours difference. So thank you for doing that on a Saturday morning. So here on Pride of Baltimore, we've been laid up most of the year. We started sailing in the normal way, crewing up in February and rigging up through into middle of March and going shakedown sailing with the idea that we're going to be in Annapolis during Maryland Day, which is March 25, and the legislature's still in session. And we want to say thank you for your support. And the governor shut down all boating, all non-essential boating. We'd already been practicing separation. The facility for Pride is behind a chain link fence. And so we were already being diligent. How did it work out for you guys? You're you got a similar kind of season. Go in March and stop in October or November. And so what's it been like?
Similar, yes. So we did rig the ship, but not with the gaff main. We put on a smaller trysail because we figured we would not have enough people to set the main, quite possibly. So we carried around and then eventually we down rigged week before last. So we've been relying heavily on some of the long-term volunteers and dear friends of the ship to put everything together. We did hope initially, like everyone else, that there would be more in-person program happening in the second half of the summer. We did end up doing a few online opportunities, mostly with the Seattle Skills Center and also with the Girl Scouts. We've had a couple interns, but in general, the in-person program really was not to be this year. So we did move the ship to Seattle and do a fundraising regatta and then move back. And again, this is all with volunteer crew. Fortunately, there is a pool to draw from in the greater Puget Sound area, and people were flexible in their own situations enough to be able to come down and put sails on the boat or take them off. So now we're more or less put away for the winter and we can move into what is next.
Yeah, so admitting a certain amount of blindness, in February, it wasn't unknown that the pandemic was brewing up. So we were continuing on in spite of that. And we compensated like everyone did as the as the tsunami of it actually arrived in our area. What was the decision making that was going on over there? Because the website says March to more or less now. Were you guys already aware that you were going to uncover the boat, or was this sort of because the tsunami sort of in the States on the coast, it came first? So what was the thinking about uncovering the boat?
In general, the thought process would be that we were going to follow the state guidelines for reopening, and we wanted to be ready to do whatever was possible. So in the beginning, we were hopeful that there would be some program in the second half of the summer, in-person program. So we wanted to be ready for it. So we did go ahead and uncover the boat and put the rig together. Although by the time that was happening, we actually uprig was really in July.
Cool. Yeah.
And of course, by that time,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kateliin.
By that time, we really realized there was not going to be in-person program. We did have this fundraising regatta that was really the main event we ended up pulling off in the year. So we did that.
A regatta, how did that work? Was that just a bunch of boats getting together and not a lot of face-to-face stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So it was a fundraiser. So instead of what is the usual fundraiser, the gala, we did this regatta. So it was similar, where people were encouraged to make a good faith pledge donation, enter their boat, and with their entry that they would bring in so many, so much money for the organization. People could enter dinghies. People could enter a virtual made-up boat with a fun team name. And especially for a first time event that came together very quickly, I think it was very successful for us.
Oh, great. That's cool. That's great. So,
Yeah.
so there's a multi-captain scenario with Adventurous.
Yes, we're in an interesting situation. We have Gordon Sims, who's been with the organization a very long time, is phasing out, so he's still doing some specific projects for the ship. And now there are two operating captains, Nate Stewart, who's been also with the organization a long time, and myself, and no one else on the ship. So we're wearing lots of hats. Fortunately, I tend to like the hats, but we're wearing lots of them right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So, Caitlin, how's it, the boat? I mean, in the sense of operating it, what sort of impressions? You've got a lot of experience on a variety of boats, square riggers and dinghies and schooners and square topsails and other vessels. So how do you find the adventures? I understand this year is a bit different because you didn't put the main gaff on her, but how would you describe handling Adventurous?
She handles like a small boat. She's crown and shield, so very cutaway forefoot, and just spins. So with the trysail, the foresail, and the staysail, we tacked, and I wasn't surprised but pleased, even not going fast. And she loves to go port side too, with that single screw. That she just spins, very responsive. So I'm looking forward to when we sail with a full sail plan.
Yeah, yeah. So I couldn't tell through any photographs I was trying to find about Adventurous. She's 19, I think 13. Is her stern post and rudder a raked scenario or a vertical scenario?
Stern post and rudder are raked quite
Okay,
a bit.
raked. Okay, yeah, that would add to her that spin quality you talk about. Sort of a fin keel kind of relationship. That's great. Oh, okay, cool. So you come to Adventurous through a variety of vessels, including Pride of Baltimore, too.
Yes.
Yeah, and you are also a member of a small cabal of post Pride of Baltimore legacy masters. I think the more seated one was Al Nejma, who was a deckhand with Pride on the 1985 trip across the Atlantic. Wayne Chimeni, who sailed the first Pride with Armin Assessor in the first year of the nonprofit. I think later on, after his sailmaking had been developed quite a while, he was involved as a master. And I can't think of anybody else after you. So you flatter Pride of Baltimore with the successes, the continuing success of those who have joined Adventurous with one of their background being from either of the two boats. So, but you've got other vessels as well. So Antarctic in a square rigger.
Yeah, well, not this year.
So how did you wind up going off to the rest of the world? There's not a lot of people that do that, Americans that do that. There's over the last, all my career, there's always been one or two. But how did you wind up getting off the continent?
I had to go. I mean, personally, that's an easy answer, and that I just knew. I think I'm a fortunate person that way. I tend to know what I want, and have an internal compass that way, which is fortunate. And I was just, I started here on the Schooner Adventurous as a student. My parents had a sailboat, so I grew up thinking sailing was fun. And this was my first traditional sailing ship, and then my first job. So this was my summer job in high school and college, and then I kept doing it. So I just love it. And the more that you do it, the more you find that's interesting about it. There are so many different things that go into it. It's the only thing I know that can feed my hungry soul. So I was after more. So in terms of leaving the continent, Picton Castle was the first time I did any real traveling. So I did the Fifth World Voyage. So that started in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. And 14 months later, we found ourselves there again, with many stories in between. And that really solidified the deal for me. I was going to do this. And then Europa was similar. I'd been in mate, I think, for a couple of years, and I wanted to work on a European ship and see what that was like, how it was different or similar, just what it was like. And I wanted to sail in some more wind to see what that was like. So Europa answered a few of those questions all at once. And it was good to run around the rig again. I didn't want to go aft and get stuck there like some people do. I want to make sure I could still do everything with my hands. So I'm very glad for that experience as well. It's definitely added another perspective into different cultures of sailing and the good things and not as good things about all of them. And it's good to see it work different ways. And once you kind of make the mental shift of what the priorities are here, then you've made it, then it's a lot easier and can be fun.
Yeah, well, I second all of that. What was your first American command?
Moment of honesty, the tall ship Unicorn. They reached out to me with a position, and I figured I shouldn't turn it down. So I was pretty young, 24 maybe, and in a way had no business being there. I certainly learned a lot. And I think everything, overall was fine. Obviously, looking back, there's a lot of things you would do better the second time, but so would everyone.
What waters were they that you were running her?
That was from Boston, Massachusetts, and we did multiple week-long trips with students, and went up and down the Mystic River. That's a good one to do on your first command. And then ended in, what is it called? Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
And actually, it was an interesting contract. In a way, it was fortunate that there was some engineering trouble, which I was able to resolve. And so that helped me gain the respect of the crew, even though we were the same age. So that, oddly enough, worked in my favor. So it was a time.
Right. And that program was oriented towards working with women, correct?
Yes, that is the intent, that it was a comfortable place for women to start to explore things that they might be reticent about otherwise. And it was very interesting to see that in practice. That's not the kind of a program that I am initially intuitively drawn to, but it was interesting to see there are some benefits. I think the students were comfortable early on, more comfortable sooner in the ship. Then with a mixed crew, it's another conversation whether or not that's the way to go or not. I think there are definitely some benefits and some reasons why those lessons can be learned in another context as well. But it was good to see that program. Fortunately, the mate was very good, Hannah Emery. So that was It's always good to have a good mate.
Yeah, yeah. What other American commands have you had leading up to Adventurous?
The next one was the Appledore 4 in the Great Lakes. And that was more fun, especially initially because it was more familiar. And I had been in the area with the Niagara, so just more familiar. The organization had a few interesting programs. One I quite liked where I won't remember the acronym, but they brought people that were responsible for agriculture in the area down to look at the water quality, because what they do in their lives actually affects the water. So it was really fascinating to see these adults very interested in the mud and what the crew was explaining, what they were finding and what it meant. It's a good program. I'll send you that information.
Yeah.
If you're interested. It was part of the process for them getting certified as an organic farm, or certain kinds of stickers they might put on their product. And part of this education was they came and looked at what was running off into the water. So that was good. We had here, yeah, all of the gory details. Also had some engine trouble in the Detroit River. So the second half of the contract was more serious. But we did make it back. For a while, I wasn't sure under what propulsion we would be getting back.
And how far ranging was that command in terms of waters?
That was from Bay City to Toledo and back, more or less. There were a few stops with day sails.
Right.
On the way, and a few unplanned stops, but.
Is it fair for me to even think to characterize being chief mate of Brig Niagara is one of the more demanding leadership positions that you've had?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. There's a lot going on. I mean, compared to a schooner, and I'm not saying it's lesser seamanship at all, but there's a lot more ship. So there's a lot more rig. There's a lot more in terms of systems. There's just more boat. There are a lot more people coming and going. So there are more volunteers and more, crew in various levels needing different things. And then the programs involve more students, and they are often coming from farther away. And then you're going in between countries. Fortunately, the paperwork is fairly repetitive with Canada, but it's all there. So there are a number of balls that you're juggling. And I am noticing, although ultimately there is more responsibility being in command, because once you get going, then you're the last word. It's in a way simpler. I won't say easy, but being the mate of a square rig ship is a real job, and I do love it.
And that wasn't your first time aboard Niagara, was it?
No, I worked there 4 seasons so far. Yeah, 2013, 14, and then what was it? 17 and 18?
Right. So
18, 19?
So your time with Europa being a bark and being on Picton Castle, another bark, that they're all very helpful in the context of how many different positions you've had on those vessels. And in the case of Europa, it's sort of like you're wearing many hats rather than one hat, as I understand, for the crew.
For the crew, Europa sails with a very small crew for the size of the ship, although the ship is remarkably easy to work.
Yeah.
So compared to Picton Castle, although they're both small barks, working the ship on the Europa feels easier. I think part of that is the yards are a little narrower. Some of it are some of the angles of the rig, but also I think it's in the materials. Picton Castle uses Manila running rigging, and in the Southern Ocean, that's not the best bet. So Europa does not do that.
Right.
And yes, even the synthetics get full of water and freeze. Don't let them tell you otherwise. So she does sail with a very small crew. My first trip south was 2 deckhands and 1 mate on a watch. So yeah, in terms of another way to do things, it's another way to do things. And the voyage crew are encouraged to participate, encouraged to help. But when the weather picks up too much, then they're not allowed on the deck. And it's just a professional crew.
And where is the, in the case of Europa, where's the voyage crew as it's termed, originating from? These are folks that are paying for the privilege of the opportunity, but what's attracting them to it? What is the description that Europa is providing that attracts them? And so how does that evolve into the dependability factor of participating short of bad weather?
Short of bad weather, yes. Well, there are more and more tours going to Antarctica. This is what they don't see. The AIS is all lit up, full of ships when you're down there, in the peninsula, not when you get far, far south. So in the Antarctic Peninsula, a lot of what the program coordinator's job is to coordinate who's going to be where when, so that you don't see the other ships, but they are there. So people come on the Europa because of the nostalgia of the adventure idea of that whatever that is, that's hard to put your finger on, that draws people to the sailing ships. So most of the time, the folks that choose the Europa over a cruise ship are doing that because they have some interest in it, and they know that they will be encouraged to participate and steer and do lookout in some weather. usually no one quite knows what they have signed up for until they're in the thick of it. But at that point, there's no going back.
Yeah, so the crew, the mate and the 2 hands have got to be pretty Johnny on the spot with the changing conditions. So a lot of awareness for the horizon for what's coming, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's fascinating and addicting. I would say the Southern Ocean is addicting. But she's a sturdy ship, and once you get kind of hunkered down with what your sail plan is going to be, she's a sturdy ship. I never felt unsafe in the vessel. And it is certainly different. I would not want to be down there in anything else. Absolutely not.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that we have no ambitions with Pride of Baltimore 2 to go down there.
I would be the first person to not sign up for that. All of that head rig, are you kidding?
Yeah, right. You might be abused, but I have wondered about going around the Horn more as a story that we would do, in which case, how would that be managed in terms of going west around? But because of course in our history we know that, not our history but the overall history of Baltimore schooners, they've gone around. So and of course the Wanderbird story is an interesting with Warwick Tompkins with a fore and after. She didn't have a square topsail at the time at all, but that's an unpowered vessel, no auxiliary power, making it around. I've wondered about Baltimore Clipper privateer going around the Horn as a story, as a video, as a movie or something, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. That has crossed my mind. But that head rig, you hear stories of dismastings of square riggers going around and ending up on the Falkland Islands. I made a trip to the Falkland Islands back in the late 70s on a 38-foot gaff ketch, and we spent 5 weeks wandering around those islands, that archipelago, and there are a bunch of wrecks, and they all have that problem of losing their critical sail power at the Horn and drifting downwind to the next best opportunity for finding shelter. And in the Falklands, they would end up staying there because there's no resources to rebuild, re-rig as a general rule. And so I can imagine Pride of Baltimore trying to deal with that. We'd probably want to do it in the dead of summer summer at the calmest time, and with modern weather forecasting, we could probably time it pretty well. There's a lot of recreational adventure sailing that's coming out of the Horn and going across or staying around that area. But anyhow, I wander around. Hey, Jeff Crosby, chief mate, Pride of Baltimore 2. You got any questions?
Sure. Kind of going back to the beginning here. Can you explain what Adventurous's program is and what that looks like?
Well, right now we're reinventing it.
Sure.
In in recent years, it has been not to quote the website too much, but multifaceted. So the idea is to be a translation between people and the sound. So there are some environmental education programs, and recently we started working with other groups. So specific, what am I trying to say? Specific. There you go. Whew, still early here. Groups that have come on potentially with their own goals in mind that the ship can help foster. So to educate, inspire, and empower. And there are a lot of ways we can be doing that. So looking to next year, we're hoping to get, if small numbers of students, that's okay. Similar programs going, probably more related to the ship and sailing and maritime professions or activities than have happened in the past. Maybe not as much of the education programs. So just getting students on the water. We're looking to potentially go back to that. There's some maritime motions and some technical college motions in the area that may be opportunities for funding. So these internships that we've started, they actually will get a stipend at the end of it. So there are some programs and possibilities that way. So it may be, I don't want to say exactly sail training, but maybe more maritime oriented than it has been in the past. But we're certainly not going to leave the environmental education aspect that's been integral to the program of the ship for quite a while now. So, but at this point, there's a lot of creativity involved. What can we do, and what will people do next year?
Yeah, we're looking in much the same way, wondering how much of what we normally do can be done, but also imagining the role of the vessel as part of the fabric of what is a Maryland identity. So as a symbol, sailing around and demonstrating and showing off, but also when dockside, trying to answer to the questions and yet stay with crew members not being at risk. So that's a big question. Speaking with Captain Phil Watson of the Blue Nose 2, they actually weren't rigging up until after the pandemic tsunami arrived. And so they delayed everything and then resolved to get underway anyway. And so they did a come watch us sail by your area all around Nova Scotia. And so they didn't have anybody, they didn't go to the dock and have anybody look at them or aboard, just the crew. So we're wondering what next year we're all wondering what next year will bring. And so, yeah, that's for vessels that are involved with students of any age. Here in Annapolis, we have a for-profit day sail operation, and they've reduced Woodwind. You might be familiar with her. I think she can carry 49 people. I think they're down to 20 or something like that. And they've been operating, apparently not having any experience with exposure. So you know, we can sort of wonder about that for next year. So so it's hitting all of us with what are we going to do, and what do we do in the meantime while we figure out what we're going to do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking it's a little bit like being drowsy behind the wheel, where it feels like there's not a lot going on. But I think what we do at this time is pretty imperative to our survival.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
it is also.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Caitlin. Go ahead.
Oh, just that I think another thing I'm finding amusing with this profession that has been out of fashion for so long, that it's so wrapped up in what's going on in the current events of the world. It's interesting to me personally that now we're right in the thick of the same things that everyone else is dealing with. And I'm just finding that sort of personally amusing.
Yeah.
We're having to confront some of these questions that we might have been putting off. Like, do students, do the youth of today want to do this?
Yeah. So, so what, if anything, is going on? The adventurous, being as old as she is, she's had some major work done to her. Is there any particular pending project for this winter?
Well, the Centennial Restoration has been an impressive sequential restoration project. And originally this winter was going to be reballasting. And so due to the reconstruction, the ship needs more lead to carry the topmast and the topsails again. So this winter was going to be that phase of the project. And that early on, we realized that was not in the cards right now. So that's the last and final phase of the restoration, which everyone is looking forward to, but we understand that now is not the time for that. So we'll get the upper hamper back another year.
Is that because she's floating a little higher with all that reconstruction?
The wood is much more dense than what it replaced. So everything is heavier.
Okay.
Significantly.
Yeah. Okay.
So the idea would be to add a lead shoe on the bottom of the keel, and then we can have the topmasts again.
Right. Well, that's all about numbers, naval architecture, and numbers, and checking and verifying, and yeah. Okay. Well, I hope that works out, because she's really a wonderful example of a period of time in naval architecture, sailing naval architecture. And as you say, that spinning around business, for a vessel her length, that's the thing that's a significant difference between Pride of Baltimore II and Shenandoah. And they're not exactly the same period. Shenandoah is a revenue cutter model, influenced by the U.S. Coast Guard regulations. Pride of Baltimore II being a Baltimore 1812 war privateer schooner from Baltimore, also influenced by Coast Guard requirements. We turn so much quicker than the Shenandoah. We're not exactly the same length. She's almost 100 on the water line. We're 91, so that plays into it. And she's a little narrower than Pride is, so that plays into it. But her directional stability is so great. We just zip, turn. Not being free to move around because of conflict of geometry. We get resistance, as you know, of having sailed aboard the boat when we're bracing up sharp. This is that we can't get up to speed any faster than Shenandoah. She might be slower going through the turn, but by the time she's fully accelerated, we're only just fully accelerating. So we might turn quicker.
Interesting.
But we're so all aback and fooling around with stuff that it takes a while. Yeah, so that's okay. Sort of interesting contrast.
That's funny.
Yeah. So Jeff, you got some more?
Sure. Kateliin, you've spent time on Pride. How did you find yourself in that scenario?
On Pride?
Yeah.
I called Jan and said, "When are you hiring a mate? I'm looking for a job," as I recall. I was getting off the Europa, so I was out of sync with the North American sailing seasons. So I think you were in the middle. It was a tall ships year. And you said, "I'm not hiring for a mate, but I'm hiring for a bosun." I said, "Great." And showed up in Duluth.
Ah, yeah. And you've been back more than once?
With Pride?
Yeah.
No, just that one time so far.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well,
Can't
and
get
you
enough Baltimore Clipper.
Cool. So, what highlights would you describe might be of interest, in the yarning business that we're doing right now? Somebody coined, Dan Moreland said, "Yarning with Jan." Okay. So, tell us a tale of an interesting experience that might be associated with some of your non-U.S. sailing.
You want me to tell fish stories?
Yeah, well, there's got to be a great story in there somewhere. How about serious seamanship? Yeah, well, that's the good
Yes.
one.
How about what? Serious seamanship?
Yeah, there's got to be some kind of like lesson learned that, I don't know. Come on, Kateliin, can't be that early over there.
Still dark. You see the window. Because there's just so many. At the end of the Picton Castle voyage, you spend a fair amount of time in the Caribbean. And because the ship has had a relationship with a lot of those places, having been around multiple times, that's really beneficial to the crew and their experiences. So in in Antigua, there is that classic yacht race. And there's also a resurgence of the Caribou sloops.
Oh, yeah.
Which are their, we're cargo schooners, and there's some revived interest in them. Some have been rebuilt and a couple new ones made. So of course the crew of the Picton Castle, through the connections of the ship's history, have access to sail on some of these Caribou sloops.
Oh, how cool.
And of course, there's a moment of hilarity where you're in something that's, rickety might not be the right word, but things are moving as you're sailing next to these incredibly expensive, shiny yachts. And just being in the middle of all that is such a highlight of what the world is. Just all of these different people and ideas and technologies and time periods all mixed in right in the same bit of water. And there you are in this colorful, crazy boat. And of course, one of the deliveries, again, some of them don't have engines, one of them did. And then of course it went out on us for lack of use. And I'm down there trying to get it going, and other people on deck trying to keep us sailing. And I wasn't on this boat, but another one that did have some traditional rock ballast that shifted, classic. So they've rolled over to the side, and the crew all get on the rail to get the boat right side up again. But then of course the boat takes off, and there they are hanging on the rail, and the boat's going away.
Yeah.
Just
that's
one colorful moment that comes to mind.
Yeah, that is a very colorful one, and demonstrates something I've been thinking about for quite some time. Is from the point of view of professionalism in the business of leadership and managing and operating a vessel, we have a one-size-fits-all approach licensing system, but we have a huge spread of vessel characteristics, and that would be a very dramatic view that you describe, reality that you described in terms of all the different models. I mean, sailing. So as an officer going from ship to ship to ship, having any sense that you're going to expect the same kind of characteristics is not what we do, but it also means it's a challenge learning what those correct characteristics are. Sail area for wind strength is sort of an afterthought, whereas maneuvering around the dock, maneuvering underway, taking sail, setting sail is more immediate. It can be a bit of a surprise to operators new to a vessel to realize, well, that was too much sail area, so and so anyway, it's a huge step for us operators to keep reminding ourselves to be respectful of the vessel type. And you've got a lot of vessel type behind you, so I can well imagine that as novel as adventurous may be as a captain, it's really all of it's going to be sort of like, yeah, this is as you said earlier, you know, I sort of expected it, but it's such a breath of confirmation when it actually goes the way you're thinking of it. So
yeah, I think it's just so important for people to sail on different ships for so many reasons. The seamanship, of course, and the cultures on board, learning to see yourself through other people's eyes, you know, whatever they seem to you, you probably seem the opposite to them. So it just, so many reasons. You need that variety of experience to actually make more of a foundation.
I would say there is one kind of exception that's being played out right now in the modern era, and going back into the tales of the life of sea, the story of the cabin boy that stays with a ship and becomes the master and is an expert within that vessel and has never been on another vessel. We have Captain Phil Watson with the Blue Nose 2, and there's very little variety of opportunity in Canada to move around, and yet there's so much expertise in what he knows about that vessel and what he's determined as the he just knows her. So that plays out. But in a world like Europe or here in the United States, with so many different vessels and jobs that mean moving around, then yeah, the more experience you get, the better prepared you are for the next vessel. When you're also going with that idea that you learn from the vessel, you don't take the lessons from the other vessel to that vessel, but you broaden that whole understanding by you're respecting the characteristics of that vessel. But it was interesting to talk with Captain Phil Watson about that reality up in Canada. There's just not a lot of options, and you stick with the boat, you get to know the boat really, really well, and that's sort of interesting contrast. Cool. All right. So how about another tale? Come on, Caitlin.
Another tale. Oh geez. I mean, could you give me a category? A category? What kind? I mean,
we have an audience of folks that are spread between what is Pride of Baltimore and what is adventurous. So maybe you know something with regards to adventurous, and your folks out Pacific Northwest that you can reflect on is pretty interesting, coming from the fact that you've been offshore, off continent, European experience, around the world experience. It's that community over there has been very dedicated to their sailing, their waters. So the sailing around Puget Sound. Talk about that. What you've learned about that. What's different about that?
Well, I've actually been saying that I'm professionally new here. So I grew up in this area, but before I had done much professional sailing. So of course I wasn't paying attention in the same way. So actually I'm finding it very interesting looking at the weather because of the way that the mountains affect it. So I'm used to looking at the synoptic chart, and that's what the wind is going to do. But the synoptic chart runs into 2 mountain ranges, and that's not what the wind does. So it's been interesting for me to watch how that is different, and I'm having to learn how to make my own predictions again, because because I have to factor in the topography, which is new to me. So that's fun and interesting for me so far. Obviously, there hasn't been a lot of sailing. There is a lot of current in this area. I do remember that from being young. Very, very strong current. So your voyage plan is based on that as much or more so than the wind. Although the ship has been recently repowered and we can make about 8 knots, which is great. It means you can do more sailing, more time for sailing. In general, you want to plan to be going with the water and not uphill.
So I've been out that way a number of times. The first sailing time was in '83 with the Pride of Baltimore, and was again up there with the second Pride of Baltimore in '94. When we were making transits from city to city, we had some time in between, and between Vancouver, Victoria, and Seattle, those movements that we had meant that we could maybe spend a night at anchor. Where do you do that up there? The water is always so deep. I don't know if you've had any reason to try to find an anchorage for the night with Adventurous yet.
I have not this season, but the ship normally does, and fortunately, other people have found those.
Yeah.
So I won't have to discover them, but there are some places you can tuck the ship. Obviously, wind direction and holding ground, depending. But yeah, the sound is pretty deep.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon for it to be 60 feet deep when you're 10 feet from shore. So coming to the East Coast, I thought it felt very eerie to be out of sight of land and in 90 feet of water. This can't be right. It felt very strange.
Yeah.
But here, yeah, it's the opposite. Obviously smaller boats stern tie all the time, so that they can be close enough to have the anchor hold, but not then swing in to the rocks the way they didn't mean to.
Yeah, when you talk about the topography, we had a very robust sail coming in from Cape Flattery, passing through the Juan de Fuca Straits in '83 with Pride of Baltimore eastbound, and the classic Venturi that is created by the hills to the north and the island of Vancouver, and then of course the mountains to the south, the Olympic Peninsula. We come in with everything flying, and then slowly take it down, because by the time we were passing, well, before, I guess the closest narrowest part of Juan de Fuca Straits, which is actually a pretty lengthy distance, a relatively similar distance across, we're 35 knots on the water behind us. So the boat can only really go maybe 9, 10, 11 knots. So you're getting into the apparent wind strengths on the ship of, double the speed of the vessel itself. So, 20, 25, 30 apparent wind. So that's way too much pressure. You have a control problem. So we were reducing. I was very pleased we weren't trying to go the other way.
Yeah, good plan. Good plan. That reminds me, actually, saying taking in sail. It reminds me of being on the lakes and the Niagara, and as you know, the wind can pick up there pretty quickly. Because the Niagara draws so little, and she's a little bit like a sailing gun barge, kind of like a sled. You can do impressive speeds with no sail set whatsoever. Yeah. And that's an interesting feeling as an officer, like we cannot slow down. And at sea, you put the wind on the quarter and you just go, there's plenty of room. You just find a comfortable riding direction. And in the lakes, there's a lee shore everywhere. It comes up real fast. So it's interesting when that's not always an option for you.
Yeah, we had an experience that's somewhat similar. We were due to be from Baltimore, move over to Chestertown for the Sultana Downrig Festival. And we had a cold front coming in just at the time they were going to do a 2-night overnights with guest crew kind of thing. And I'm not getting out in the bay with that cold front. So we waited and waited and waited and waited. And so the cold front passed through just before midnight. So we're over here at the compound at Clinton Street. So we get out and away just after midnight. And we tidy up. And as the boat's maneuvering around the corner to start to go out the river towards the east southeast, and the wind is beginning to build out of the northwest, I turn the engines off, and the crew are sort of all looking at me and said, just go down the channel. By the time we hit the Key Bridge, which is only 3 miles away, we were doing 8 knots and climbing, not a stitch of sail on the boat. The wind, in fact, we're the yards are squared because it helps with the power, but at some point, I think we even braced up to reduce the amount of power. So we literally drifted across the width of the bay, all the way into the Chester River and around the corner with that breeze. And come dawn, the river bend was such that we had to start motoring. But, I think we touched, Jeff, you were on board. How fast did we wind up going?
Yeah, there's a couple of moments of 11 knots, but some pretty solid 10 and a half
Under
bear poles. It was pretty great.
It's just a funny feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, and we are going.
Yeah, that was fun. I had a lot of fun listening to the crew talk about it.
It was a really unique experience, I think, for a lot of people on board.
Yeah.
I have one final question here. Do you have any fond memories of your time on Pride, or fond experiences that you look back on?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
fine.
of course. Yeah, she's just so fun. One that comes to mind is, I don't remember where we were, but we had come around some little point and we short tacked in a small area up to the anchor. That was just great, running back and forth in the crinkle. She's such a fun ship to sail. Just, you got to be right in everything. So that comes to mind. That was very fun. Also, when we were off the wind, I think it was the first time we were off the wind, and I was just flabbergasted at how easy it was. It's like, this rig, it's phenomenal. You want to go upwind? Here we go. You want to go downwind? Easy. I was just taken aback. Just the versatility of the ship. I can see why you could say for years and years and years, because there was so much to be gotten out of it.
Sure.
Yeah, I've sometimes tried to make the alliteration of the tractor trailer, 18-gear tractor trailer, imagining that when it's heavily loaded, it's got to go through all the gears, and when it's lightly loaded, it can skip the gears. And so I use that as it's not a very great comparison, is to try to imagine, but in the thinking of what sail air to use under what conditions, there's a lot to consider. And that's been a very interesting thrall for me over the decades that I've been involved with the first vessel and this vessel. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat, and they can all be sort of correct. So the point is which one is the most effective? Is still, even today, it's sort of like, okay, I got to scratch my head about this for a second, and yet I've been sailing the boat for as long as I have. So yeah, she's quite a engaging vessel. And my wife Leslie likes to say, you've done it for so long, you really only get a real kick out of things when you're racing. So I can't disagree. It really puts that business of trying to get the best out of a boat in a that is not as pressure driven when we're doing our transits. And then interestingly enough, I thought in my younger years I would have nothing to do with day sailing. I would have no interest in it. I mean, Day Sailing Pride here in Baltimore has been another kind of education. It's just the 3 sails, the foresail, loose-footed foresail, square topsail, and the staysail we euphemistically refer to as the day sail combo. Learning what the boat's able to do. 6 knots of true wind. We're able to tack her. We're able to do 3 or better knots. And then you get 10 to 12 true knots, and the crew can't do anything spread out. They can't do anything at the same time. They have to all pile up 1 sail at a time. And so there's that quality of everything's easy, and then all of a sudden it's difficult. And that's that range of power she has. So it becomes a mate's crew management situation, is to say, okay, leave that, do this, because we got to get that done before we come back to this, instead of everything happening at once. It's interesting to observe and be a part of at the same time.
Well, Kateliin, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. And I want to thank everybody who has been watching us this morning. And thank you for those that donated. That helps keep the show going. And Captain Miles, do you have any parting words for us today?
Kateliin, thank you very, very much for taking your Saturday morning, pre-dawn, I'm imagining, to join me and Jeff with our little yarning session here. Great to see you. And I wish you all the fun of a command on that vessel as you go forward. She's going to be a lot of fun for you, anyone, but for you when you get deep into it next year and go sailing again. As for all of us, stay diligent, everyone.